Here what we're going to do is put a slight chamfer, about a 3mm chamfer on the end of our bolt, okay, and this is going to help us with tapping our thread. Okay, so now to do our chamfer, what we actually have to do is shift the angle of our tool post. To do that, we have our Allen key here, and we're just going to slightly loosen off these bolts here so that we can spin that around. Now, like I said, just loosen the bolt. It doesn't need to come fully out. Okay, so I've just loosened both of them off. There's one at the back, okay, and you can see there's a gauge just along here. It might be hard to see on the camera, but when you do see this line, there's a mark in the center. If you shift that around and line it up on the 30 degrees, like so, and then just firmly tighten that back in place. If there is swarf in that head of the bolt, just dig it out. Don't try and jam that Allen key into the head of the bolt with this swarf. It will just slip, and that strips out that profile of the head of the bolt there. Okay, do the same to the back. Clamp that into place, and now what we're going to do, okay, is just position our cutting bit so that we can take this chamfer off. Okay, so instead we're going to be using this gear here. Turn that on, position. Okay, then move up 1mm at a time, just carefully, 2 hands on, go through, and go another millimetre. Just nice and steady. And one more. So I've got a 3mm taper or chamfer just on the end of my head bolt there. Okay, so the next step from here, what we will do, and you have to do this in the right order, okay, is I'll just bring that out of the jaws of the chuck slightly, okay, and we're going to measure 8mm. So our first chamfer, and like I said, this is the chamfer that's adjacent to the bolt is the one that we're going to do first. Okay, so if I mark that there, you can do this with a permanent, I'm doing this with a permanent marker so you can see, but you can do that with a scriber. Okay, and let's just turn that on. Okay, so you can see that there. We're going to follow the same process, so get this up. Just make sure it's not going to bump into anything. Okay, and again, same process here. Okay, so go through once, wind it back to the start, and we'll go 1mm at a time. So this is an 8mm chamfer. Another millimetre. Be very careful not to run your tool into the jaws of the chuck. And you should have that with enough space. Almost there. I think maybe 1 or 2 more passes. There we go. And up. Okay. So from here, this is it will be a bit warm, so just be aware of that. Okay. So this is how you want the order to go in. So do the chamfer at the end first, okay? Do the chamfer that's adjacent to the bolt, and then we're going to flip this around and we'll do our final chamfer on the top, okay? So now we can clamp this way. Okay, and again, measure 8 mil. Okay, and let's repeat this process once more. Okay, just off the edge, and now coming this way. Nice and steady. Up, 1 mil. Now, just double check if the head of your head bolt does measure longer than 22 mil, that's too long. So before you take this out of the okay, just check, and if it's longer, just face off what you need to on the top there of that head bolt, okay? Okay, so that's what your head bolt should now look like. You have your chamfer on the end, and our two larger chamfers here, the 8 mil ones, okay? I've done my center hole there and my center hole there as well. What we're going to do now, we're going to place this in the vise. We're going to mark the center of the head of our bolt. We're going to center punch that and drill a couple of holes. So when you do clamp this in the vise, I have some soft jaws here just so that we don't put marks on our work. Place that carefully, clamp it on a flat surface, okay? Get your steel rule, and we're going to find the midpoint. So that should be 22 mil. If I measure in from the top 11 mil and just put a mark there, do that with the scriber. Okay, I'm just doing that with a permanent marker to make it a little bit easier for you to see. Grab your ball peen hammer and a center punch, and let's just center punch that in the middle. Okay. Now that you've drilled your hole through the head of your head bolt, so that's a 7 mil hole, what we're going to do now is tap a thread into that hole so that we can put a bolt, so we can thread our bolt onto that, which will be held in the chuck of the metal lathe to be able to face off the sides of our head bolt. Okay, so firstly, what we're going to do is place this in the vise. Remember, when you're clamping on the vise, that we clamp on the flat ends, okay? And I'm using my soft jaws as well, just to protect our head bolt from any damage from those. Okay, so what we have here is we're using, the tap that we're using is an M8 by 1.25. Okay, so that's what our tap looks like. Okay, you'll notice that on the shank, that has that square extrusion. That's how that will fit into our wrench. Okay, so you can see here the profile to be able to clamp up our wrench. Okay, so to attach our tap to the wrench, that just gets threaded in and then carefully tighten that up. Okay, what we also need is just some metal working compound. Okay, we will just apply some of that compound onto, okay, just open that up. So apply some of that on there on both sides. Okay, now what we do here, so when you're holding the wrench, obviously make sure you're applying an even amount of pressure, okay, on either side. And I'll start to spin. Make sure that everything is spinning together, the wrench and our tap. And you'll notice, you'll start to feel it biting into the inside of the hole. Okay, and that's how you'll know if we're cutting our thread. So starting to now cut our thread. What I'll do is I'll back that off a turn just to release the swarf, and then I'll do another full turn before I back that off. Okay, and I'm going to keep that process going all the way till I can get as far down as possible. Okay. Don't over tighten, so if you feel that it's not spinning, then don't try to over tighten. You may end up snapping the tap. That's very difficult to get that out once you do that. Alright, that's gone as far as go. So we'll remove the tap. Nice and carefully, keeping that nice and straight. You will now notice that we have a thread on the inside of that hole there, okay? So there is a thread in there. What we're going to do from here, okay, is we need to use, so you'll have an M8 bolt, okay, and an M8 nut. We need to, and what I will do is just cut it carefully, cut the head of the bolt off. Now, so we have the thread. It's what we want to thread our nut on. That's going to be now thread onto our head of our head bolt, and we will carefully just thread that through. If it's not spinning for you, just grab some vice grips. Okay, just to help you, just to spin that, to turn that through. Okay. You want to go at least 10 mils depth. Okay, now what I'll do is just tighten up that nut. Grab your shifting spanner. Okay, and just tighten this up firmly, okay? So that's what it should look like, okay? From here,